Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. Today we have a very entertaining yet educational story as it pertains to female nature. The title, I discovered my new girlfriend has a fiance and is still servicing, wink wink, her ex-husband. Now, what do I have to say about this right out of the gate? Nasty! That is just nasty. This woman is juggling, in quotation marks, three men at the same time, and I guarantee she's not requiring them to use condoms or protection of any kind. And women, that is just nasty. Your vaginas are incubators for keeping sperm alive so that you can get pregnant. Unfortunately, they're also incubators for bacteria and virus-borne STDs. So don't have sex with multiple partners, regardless of whatever any movement out there tells you. And if you must do that, make sure the men that you're having sex with wrap it up. Don't be nasty. All right, I said my piece before we get into this. Okay, here we go. This happened a few years back, and in fact, this guy in the comments said that this happened, I think, over 25 years ago. But I think it's a story worth telling as it speaks to the extremes of female nature. At the time, I was 27, and the female in this story, let's call her Carrie, she was 24. My career was on a fast track at a fast-growing tech company, and Carrie had just started as a teller at a local bank in my hometown. I was inside the bank one day to deposit a check and that I had received and spotted her at a teller window. She immediately caught my attention. She wasn't a 10, but a solid 8 plus, and she oozed an aura of being just a sweet, wholesome, conservative woman. She had reddish brown hair, green eyes, and a supple body. She was a true Irish peach. Sounds good. I was lucky enough to have her wait on me, and we made small talk. Her voice was Marilyn Monroe-like, and she came across as being very submissive and feminine. She called me by my last name, Mr. Last Name, and gave me glances indicating that either she was interested in me or maybe she was just a new employee trying to provide good customer service. Regardless, I was completely hooked and thinking with my little head at this point. I didn't ask her out there, but when I got out to my car, I started kicking myself for not doing so. As I drove off, I started thinking about what it would be like to get with her, how sexy she would be, and what she would be like as a mother and a wife. Now, this guy's really jumping ahead here in his mind. He says, I know it's crazy, but admit it, guys, we've all had these fantasies about hot women at some point in our lives. And I agree, we've had those type of fantasies, but for me, a lot of those fantasies came like years and years ago when I was quite young. As I got older and I realized what women were all about, I didn't have those jump to mother and wife type fantasies like this guy's having. Lucky for me, I received a couple more stray checks from relatives for my birthday and needed to go to the bank to deposit them a couple days later. Carrie was there, but she didn't wait on me. But I was able to talk to her since she was at a teller window next to the one I was. During the visit, I was making small talk with both Carrie and the teller that was helping me. I felt uncomfortable asking her out in front of the other teller, so instead I went out to my car and called her from my cellular phone. When she picked up the call that had been transferred to her, I immediately told her who I was and said, I think you are beautiful, and I wanted to see if you would go out to dinner with me. Back in those days, dinner was kind of the normal first date. See, back in those days, things were more traditional. So you actually had to court a woman, and do a little bit more, to get with her than just, hey, let's hook up on Tinder and let's jump right in the sack. Things were a little bit different back then, even for women who were quote unquote loose. She replied, "Oh, thank you, Mr. I would love to go out with you. Do you want to get together tonight?" I told her that I was busy with work tonight, but I was available tomorrow, Wednesday night, if that worked. And she said, yes, definitely. I told her we could go to a nice little restaurant on an old canal about 10 minutes away, and she said, sounds great. I can't wait to see you. Again, my mind started racing and thinking this might be the one. After all, she checked all the boxes. She was beautiful. She was feminine. She was submissive. She was supportive. She was conservative. And she was sweet. What else could you ask for in a woman? I was so caught up in my thoughts about Carrie that night, I had to take things into my own hands to relieve the tension. And you know what he's talking about there. The evening arrives and I go to her apartment to pick her up. She appears at the screen door as I'm parking and motions for me to come in. I exit my car and walk up to the screen door, which enters into her kitchen. Whoa! I got the shock of my life. This woman I saw in front of me was totally different than the one I've been talking to at the bank. She was dressed in a white miniskirt that was only inches below her beautiful private parts. Had on white tights with see-through designs on them and black pump heels. So this dude, man, he thought this was like some conservative little house on the prairie kind of looking woman. And then all of a sudden he gets to her home and man, she's dressing like a prostitute almost. When I saw her, I was shocked and said, wow, you look great and smell great too. She looked at me sheepishly, and said, we don't have to go out. Why don't we just stay here and get to know each other better? Not expecting this reply, I was a little startled and clumsily said, let's go out and have a nice dinner and talk more, and then we can come back here and get to know each other. She said, okay, and smiled, and we departed in my car for the restaurant. The entire ride, she stared at me adoringly and didn't say much unless I asked questions. Even though I loved this adoration, I felt a little unsettled by the overt sexual overtones she was sending. I mean, this guy was probably in shock because he's expecting, again, this very conservative woman, very shy. And then all of a sudden, he gets with her and she's a total freak. So this is, like a total 180. At the restaurant, the same behavior continued. The sexual overtones were overt and direct. She stared at me and said several times how gorgeous and handsome I was, that I had nice eyes, I had perfect lips, cute ears. She also said some weird things like her favorite thing to do was smoke weed while naked in the woods at a nearby state park. What the hell did she mean by that? Though I tried to redirect the conversation, all of this sex talk combined with the sight and smell of her was really working me up. At the end of the meal, we ordered a decadent dessert to split, and she came to my side of the booth to share it. While eating, we passionately kissed, and she rubbed my leg, and I started rubbing her legs, including those juicy inner thighs. At this point, we were both about to explode. We finished our dessert and headed out, kissing again passionately at the car before getting in. On the ride back to her apartment, she was rubbing my package with her left hand the entire way. Now, you got to keep your eyes on the road and your feet on the pedals, guy. You got to be careful with this kind of stuff going on in the car, in a moving vehicle. I had trouble concentrating on the road. When we got back to her place, we spilled into the kitchen and immediately stripped and got to business. We spent the next 2.5 hours plus exploring every inch of each other. I mean, every inch. We basically did everything there was to do, some things 2 to 3 times during this time. So he really made, the most of those 2.5 hours. It was now nearly 12:30 a.m. and I had to get to work the next morning early. So we finished up and she turned on the light to go to the bathroom to clean up. When she did, I saw photos of a young toddler on the dresser and on the wall. Uh-oh. The boy looked to be 2 to 3 years old at most, and there were several pics of Carrie holding him. When she emerged from the bathroom, I went in, and when I came out, I asked her who was the cute little boy in the pictures. I was thinking it was a nephew or some other relative. She said, "That's my son." Needless to say, I was surprised, as I didn't know she was a mom, as she didn't discuss this at dinner. Now, to be fair, we didn't talk about our past. No, you guys were too, enamored with each other and focused on the present, and you probably didn't ask anything and probably didn't even have an opportunity to ask anything about her past. She went on to say that she was married for a couple of years and divorced over a year ago, as they weren't a good match, but were good parents. I didn't say anything more about the child or her ex-husband at this point, and just gave her another passionate kiss and a big hug, thanking her for the great evening. She returned the sentiment, and I left saying that I would give her a call, as I'd like to see her again. And she replied saying, "I can't wait to be with you again. Tonight was incredible." The next day I was slammed at work all day into early evening and didn't get a chance to call her until 8 p.m. Now that's actually a smart thing to do for all you guys out there. You don't want to seem too needy with a woman, regardless of how well it went. So you don't want to be texting her like crazy and calling her. You want to kind of play it smooth, give it maybe 24 hours before you reach out. And don't, get into an elaborate text message or telephone call with her. Just something quick there. So that she's always wondering about you. What's this guy doing? So she's always thinking about you. Instead, a lot of guys, they end up, just constantly texting her and calling her. And she's like, God, I wish this guy would kick it into neutral. My thoughts overnight, though, had changed about her. From being marriage material to being an FWB, a friends with benefits, since she was a single mom. I tried calling her apartment twice, but there was no answer, and she didn't have an answering machine. At this time, less than half the people in America had a cell phone, and she was one of the people who didn't have one. So again, he's talking, this was like 25 plus years ago, I think is what he said in the comments. So most people didn't have a cell phone back then, surprisingly. The following day was Friday, and again, I had a busy day at work, but called her on my way home from work at just after 5 p.m. A guy answered the phone, and I immediately said, "Oh, sorry, I have misdialed." He said, "Okay," and we ended the call. I called back, and the same dude answered. I said I was calling to speak with Carrie. He replied, "She's not here right now. She went to the store." I said, I'm sorry, who am I speaking to? He replied, "This is her husband." I was stunned and tongue-tied, to say the least. He then said, "Is there any message?" I said, "No, I'll call back later." He said, "Okay," and we ended the call. When I got off the call, I immediately began thinking, what the her husband is at her apartment? Various things were running through my mind at this point. After thinking about the situation, I thought it best not to call her again, since I was not looking to get involved in a single mom, ex-husband relationship, even as an FWB, though I would like to connect with her one more time, as the sex was unbelievably incredible. On Saturday morning, I went out to pick up some things at a grocery store and ran into a woman who worked at the bank with Carrie. She was a very nice middle-aged woman and a long-term acquaintance of my family. She approached me and said, "It's none of my business, but I feel strongly that you need to know this information." I was not sure what she was going to say, but she then replied, "I heard you went out with Carrie on Wednesday evening." I said, yes, I did." She said, "I think you should know that she has a fiancé who proposed to her and she accepted." I, of course, was stunned and just replied, wow, I didn't know that." She said, "I didn't think you did, as you are such a nice guy, a good guy." She then said, not only does she have a fiancé, but she is also still servicing her ex-husband. Wink, wink, we know what that means, and can't decide between the two. I was dumbfounded and replied, "Oh, wow, wow, I'm shocked. I can't believe it." She replied, "Honey, it's crazy, but it's true. You need to be careful with that girl." Man, do you ever need to be careful with a woman like that. I thanked her several times for letting me know about this. On the drive home from the store, my mind was racing, and I kept repeating, WTF, WTF, WTF. Then reality set in, and I started thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I didn't use protection. There we go. What if she gets pregnant? Then I thought, she likely had sex with all three of us last week, and I probably swallowed some of their swimmers. Gross. That is totally gross, dude. Then I thought, I've got to get an STD test. She may have given me something. My mind was all over the place, and I was full of nervous energy and rage at this point. So I went out to the local park and ran as fast as I could, for as far as I could to blow off steam and clear my mind. That Monday, I took the day off and traveled to the town where I went to college, as there's a clinic there that performs STD tests. Back then, they were referred to as VD tests, venereal disease tests. I didn't want to use my company insurance for fear of discovery, and I knew this clinic accepted cash and credit card payments as they catered to college students. Luckily, the comprehensive STD test came back negative. All right. On Monday evening and again several times on Tuesday, I received calls from Carrie's apartment. Now realize she doesn't have a cell phone, so she's calling from her physical phone in her apartment. And I didn't answer, and she didn't leave a message. I never saw or heard from her again after this. Now listen to what happens next. I did, however, find out a week later that she had quit her job at the bank that Friday. So this is like 9 days after he was with her, because he was with her on a Wednesday night. She quits on a Friday, and on Saturday, she ran off with that fiance and got married. Just 10 days after she was with me. That poor bastard, he says, and I say, that poor dumb bastard. This was a life-altering experience that changed me from a naive young guy to a wise man when it comes to female nature. Be careful out there, boys, he says. Monkey branching and hypergamy is real. Don't ruin your life for 2.5 hours of fleeting pleasure like I nearly did. Some guys, I can tell you, OP, they ruin their lives for 15 minutes of pleasure. You at least got 2.5 hours, but you did dodge a bullet, and that didn't happen to you, thank goodness. Now, let's go through some lessons learned with this video. First of all, don't judge a book by its cover when it comes to women. Some women may come across as very conservative. They're in conservative families, but I found some of those women are the biggest freaks out there. Meanwhile, there's other women that you may think, man, these women are a little loose and, got some tattoos on them. And this woman's probably, let's say a wild woman. And it turns out she's more conservative than the girl that you think is conservative. So you can't judge a book by its cover. Also, number 2, a woman that is too willing to get it on quickly is a huge red flag, especially when she's a single mom. She's got ulterior motives, okay? So it's a red flag. I mean, it's different when it's just a hookup and you both know it's a hookup and that's what your intention was going into it, but that wasn't the intention here. So when this woman starts to come across very overtly sexual, you got to say, hey, man, what's going on here? Something's up. Something's going on behind the scenes. Number 3, you always got to use protection, guys. Always. Women, 99% of the time, are not going to require you to wear protection. They get caught up in the moment. They think to themselves, well, I'm using birth control pills or other forms of birth control. I just want to feel the full experience. But as I said up front, vaginas are incubators. Incubators for procreation and incubators for STDs. So you better cover it up every time. And that means using dental dams if you're going to perform oral sex, unless you want to be ingesting potentially some other guy's swimmers. Hypergamy and monkey branching are natural instincts. I've said this over and over for women. And weak women, vulnerable women, which I think are 66, 67% of the population, those untrustworthy women, they cannot control those instincts. Now, the good women out there, the 33%, 1/3, they have those instincts, but they can control them. They know right from wrong, and they are just good women, and you can trust them. The other 2/3, in my opinion, you can't trust. So hypergamy and monkey branching are natural and real and are major risks. Ex-husbands will always be part of a woman's life, especially if there are children involved. Okay, that's going to be a given. That's why I say never get involved outside of an FWB with a divorced woman or with a single mom, because it's always going to potentially lead to something sticky and something that you really don't want to be involved with, unless that's your thing. You know, there's some guys out there that they love that, but I can tell you that's not for me. And finally, never be a cuck for a woman like this fiance did. Now, maybe this poor fiance, this girl, this Carrie, she may have been able to keep the fact that she was still doing her ex-husband from him. And obviously this poor fiance didn't know about this hookup she had with the OP just 10 days later. But man, you better really get to know a woman really well before you jump in. And I always say don't get married. But if you're going to, man, you better find out every single thing about her, every trait about her, every skeleton in that closet, things about her family, her personal life before you make that commitment. Now, hopefully for this poor guy, they lived happily ever after, but somehow I doubt it. I would probably wager that that woman strayed at some point during their marriage. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, hit that like button, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to this great channel if you haven't already done so, and I'd like to hear from you. Let me know what you think of this story. Have you had a crazy story like this where a woman came on to you like this and turned out to be something different than what you expected? Let us know about it in the comments. And I thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you on the next